Good morning. It's Tuesday, the 23rd of June. You're watching Euronews, and this is Europe Today. Welcome to the program. I'm Stefan Grobe. Coming up, calling it quits. British Prime Minister Keir Starmer announced his resignation yesterday, paving the way for what is expected to be an orderly transfer of power to frontrunner Andy Burnham, who could become Britain's 7th leader in 10 years as early as next month. In an emotional speech, Starmer said he had listened to his governing Labour Party and realised that he was no longer the man who should lead it into a national election due in 2029. We'll have insights from our analyst Marit Gwynne-Jones. The dispute that keeps escalating. Poland's centre-right government is accusing nationalist President Karol Nawrocki of making a strategic blunder by stripping Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky of Warsaw's most prestigious medal, the Order of the White Eagle. That's the latest twist in the bitter historical feud opposing two countries that should be allies united against Russia. We'll have the latest with our correspondent Sasha Vakulina. And the visitor from Astana. The president of Kazakhstan, Kassym-Jomart Tokayev, is in Brussels. His goal? To deepen cooperation between the European Union and Kazakhstan, a key geopolitical partner in Central Asia. The EU is already Kazakhstan's largest trading and investment partner, and while Kazakhstan's economy is being modernized and diversified, there are opportunities for both sides. How? We'll ask Kazakhstan's ambassador to the EU. But first, the political turbulence in the United Kingdom. On this day 10 years ago, the UK voted to leave the European Union, triggering one of the most tumultuous episodes in its political history. A decade on, and the political volatility has not gone anywhere. Yesterday, Prime Minister Keir Starmer announced his resignation on the doorsteps of 10 Downing Street, paving the way for the 7th UK Prime Minister in just 10 years. For the latest, I'm glad to be joined now by our correspondent, Marit Gwynne-Jones. Good morning, Marit. Marit, we sat here yesterday to make sense of it all, and here we are again. So why don't you bring us up to speed on what happened during the past 24 hours?
So, Stefan, yesterday, as you know, we saw that famous lectern again outside 10 Downing Street and another Prime Minister saying that he is stepping down. We've seen this scene an unusual number of times in the past 10 years. In fact, as you mentioned earlier, just 10 years ago to this day, we had the Brexit referendum, and a couple of days later, David Cameron famously stepping down. And 10 years on, it feels a little bit like deja vu. Right. And we've seen this moment so many times in the past 10 years, a real indicator of the political volatility that Brexit arguably has triggered in the country. Let's take a listen to what Prime Minister Keir Starmer had to say yesterday.
Every decision I've taken has been about putting the country I love first. That is why I will resign as leader of the Labour Party. I have spoken to His Majesty the King this morning to inform him of my decision.
He then set out a timeline, Stefan, for his departure, saying that nominations for the next leader of the Labour Party and the country would be open in July, and a next Prime Minister would be in office at the latest by September. But then during the day, it became increasingly clear that that could happen sooner rather than later. And that's because the favourite, the frontrunner, Andy Burnham, is looking increasingly likely to run uncontended. His most likely challenger, who was the former Health Secretary Wes Streeting, who stepped down from Starmer's government in May, he said yesterday he was in fact putting his weight behind Andy Burnham for Prime Minister. And at the moment, it doesn't look likely that anyone is going to run against Burnham, and meaning that he could be fast-tracked into 10 Downing Street, Stefan, and we could see a new Prime Minister in office as early as 3.5 weeks from now.
And Marit, were there any reactions in Brussels? And do they know Andy Burnham here?
Well, I think it's fair to say that EU officials and diplomats here really don't know him very well. Domestically in the UK, he's a very recognisable figure. You know, he presents himself as kind of the man of the people, close to the people, while internationally he's not really a statesman. And here in Brussels, certainly he doesn't have any big recognition. That's a challenge because Starmer did really build his profile, and that was really clear from the outpour of messages we saw from EU leaders yesterday congratulating Starmer on the work he did to kind of bolster European cooperation, bolster Europe's defences and so on. So Andy Burnham has his work cut out there. But what is clear as well is that the timetable now is very tricky internationally because Starmer is likely to still be in office when there's a NATO summit in Ankara in early July. Also, when President Macron of France gathers the coalition of the willing for Ukraine on the 13th of July. But if this is fast-tracked, as we expect it to be done, it could mean Burnham being sworn in as early as the 18th of July. That's just before that EU-UK summit was meant to take place in Brussels here on the 22nd of July. That's now in major doubt. So let's take a listen to what a European Commission spokesperson had to say on this.
We are reassessing with President Costa and the UK the opportunity of still holding the summit as had been announced last week, and we will take it from here.
Stefan, there's been months of negotiation running up into the summit. There were hopes to close a series of deals to bolster agri-food exports, for example, also to set up a youth experience scheme between both sides. That is looking on the rocks right now. And the question here in Brussels, I think, is what is Andy Burnham's EU policy? Will he continue with Starmer's legacy? That's quite possible. Or will he take a slightly different approach? So I'm sure that many here in Brussels, Stefan, have been probably Googling Andy Burnham and trying to find out as much as they can about him and about his Brexit policy.
By the way, so did I yesterday. Mary Gwynne-Jones, thank you for this update. Much appreciated. 10 years after Brexit, Britain is still asking itself the same fundamental question: was leaving the European Union worth it? Public opinion remains deeply conflicted. While many Britons now see Brexit as a mistake, divisions persist over what comes next. Jakub Janas about what Brits really want.
They say there are three kinds of lies: lies, damned lies, and statistics. And while the numbers can rarely capture the raw complexities of what we want, what we really want, they carry an inescapable weight when a referendum locks them into law. And exactly 10 years ago today, the United Kingdom made a historic choice that permanently reshaped Europe and the UK itself. And 10 years later, that debate, like it or not, is still alive. But Britons do not need another European to tell them what they want. So your Continental reporter has prepared something far more British. A review. A recent study by Ipsos and King's College London reveals a public deeply conflicted. And today, almost half of Britons state Brexit is going worse than expected, compared to just 9% who view it as a success. But here is a catch. The data exposes a fascinating contradiction. A majority now agree that Britain should allow EU citizens to live and work in the UK in exchange for single market access, which is quite a rise since the vote. However, and that's very important, the moment the argument shifts from economics to sovereignty, the math changes completely. A majority still prioritizes full control over immigration, even if it means a more limited relationship. Finally, Britons openly desire closer alignment on specific issues, with almost half backing a stronger trading relationship and a clear majority demanding a joint security partnership. However, to ever get back in, the UK needs total unanimity. Let me explain. All 27 EU member states hold an absolute veto. A single no from any capital locks the door permanently. And here goes the ultimate paradox. Inside the bloc, Britons were bound by European rules but helped write them. Outside the bloc, they remain completely dependent on the exact same rules, with absolutely zero say in their creation. So it turns out taking back control just meant handing the EU the remote control. But hey, at least they got that £350 million a week for the NHS, right?
Jakub Janas reporting. And now to the bitter historical feud between Ukraine and Poland that is challenging the alliance between the two countries despite their shared war against Russia. The dispute centers on Kiev's renaming of an army unit after a nationalist force responsible for World War II atrocities of Poles, according to Warsaw, which has soured relations and exposed rival historical interpretations. The severity of the diplomatic fallout will likely become clear soon when Ukrainian President Zelensky decides whether to attend this week's Ukraine Recovery Conference in the northern Polish city of Gdansk. For more on this, I'm joined by our correspondent, Sasha Vakulina. Good morning, Sasha. So, it's not only Zelensky's participation in this conference that is somewhat up in the air, but a close aide to the president of Poland has claimed that Karol Nawrocki has not received an invitation. What's happening here?
Indeed, this is the latest in this spat, Stefan, with Nawrocki's senior aide saying that there was no invite. So he stated that president did not receive wasn't invited. So he's not going to the event to which he wasn't invited by Prime Minister Donald Tusk. And this is where we see the internal Polish politics as well, with the fingers being pointed at Donald Tusk. Now, the senior aide also said that none of the staff from the presidential office of Nawrocki are going to attend. Now, the reaction in Kyiv was very cautious when asked about it. Volodymyr Zelensky's advisor, Dmytro Litvin, said that this is not up to Zelensky or Ukraine to decide that. He said that it wouldn't be appropriate for us to invite the president of Poland to an event in Polish city. It is an internal Polish matter. Few days left, we will see whether Karol Nawrocki and Volodymyr Zelensky are going to attend the conference in Gdańsk, which is a very important event, which is actually aims at mobilizing economic support and investment for Ukraine and for recovery of Ukraine, Stefan.
I mean, how can the two sides get out of this number? What is the way forward here?
There is no end in sight at this stage. Kyiv tried to make certain steps towards Warsaw earlier in June when the head of Zelensky's administration, Kyrylo Budanov, he traveled to Warsaw. He met with the defense minister, trying to find the solution. That didn't help. There are also two political figures now in Warsaw who are trying to do something. First of all, this is the foreign minister, Radek Sikorski. He said that Russia's war waging against Ukraine for over 4 years now is way more important than what's happening now with this dispute. And also, it's again Donald Tusk, the Prime Minister of Poland. He did call it a strategic mistake, and he said both sides will pay dearly for it in terms of their reputational geopolitics and the cooperation between the two countries. He even went as far, Stefan, as to quote Pope John Paul, calling for two sides to heal the historic grievances and to focus on the future rather than focusing on the past. So this is one of the latest arguments coming from Warsaw trying to find the solution.
Well, fascinating story, at least entertaining, right? Sasha Vakulina there for us. Thank you very much. The Russian war against Ukraine will go down in history as an event that forced Europe to realign its political compass and strengthen its international partnerships. One of these partners is Kazakhstan, a former Soviet republic in Central Asia, about 10 hours by plane from Brussels. Rich in natural resources and energy, the country is gaining in economic and political influence and is offering a lot of opportunities to European investors. Now, Kazakhstan's President Kassym-Jomart Tokayev is in Brussels for a 2-day visit. Earlier, I spoke to the head of Kazakhstan's mission to the EU, Roman Vasilenko, and I asked him about Tokayev's message to Europe.
His message is that we have done a lot, but we can do much more. Kazakhstan already is one of the largest suppliers of energy to Europe. It's the third largest supplier of crude to the European Union. Kazakhstan is also a major partner for the critical raw materials development in the future. And Kazakhstan, a country that develops AI, is also a partner in AI development. But on a political level, his message is that the European Union is important for Kazakhstan as one of the key strategic partners for our country globally. We are in the heart of Eurasia. We border Russia, we border China, but we would like very much to strengthen our mutually beneficial ties with the European Union.
Speaking about these ties, trade between Kazakhstan and the EU has grown substantially in recent years, and Kazakhstan has attracted significant European investment. Now, which sectors beyond energy offer the biggest untapped opportunities for EU investors?
Indeed, Kazakhstan now attracted $210 billion from the European companies, and mostly in energy. I grant you that. But the most promising in the future, and already now, are investments in in transport and logistics, in critical raw materials, in AI, in green hydrogen, and in green energy generally, as well as in finance, because we've built Astana International Financial Center, which already is home to 5,800 companies from around the world.
You mentioned it, Kazakhstan possesses significant reserves of rare earths and other critical minerals. How can Europe make the most of these critical mineral supplies, and what does Kazakhstan offer?
Well, Kazakhstan already produces 21 out of 34 critical raw materials that the European Union identifies as such in the Critical Raw Materials Act. What we bring to the table is our openness to cooperation on a mutually beneficial basis, and our message is simple. You bring investment and technologies, you not only extract, but process critical raw materials in Kazakhstan, and we both reap benefits from that. So already one big project in Kazakhstan is identified as a strategic project by the European Commission. That's a project that, according to Ursula von der Leyen, will be producing 100,000 batteries worth of graphite for electric vehicles a year once it's online. And this is just one example of the many to come.
As you know, Europe is desperate to diversify away from Russian energy dependence. Is Kazakhstan prepared to become a major long-term energy partner for the EU, or are there limits of what you can do?
Well, we are already, as I said, one of the 3 largest suppliers of crude to the European Union. There are limits because the limits have to do with the amounts that we can produce domestically in terms of oil production, and there are limits in terms of transportation capacities. But we're working to expand this number. Already we supply 65 million tons of oil to the European Union, but it can grow to about 100 million tons in the next 4 or 5 years. But it's not just about oil. As I said, it's about hydrogen. We are about to produce 2 million tons of green hydrogen a year since 2030 with the help of the German-Swedish company. So we will be supplying other kinds of energy resources to the European Union, and we're keen to remain this important strategic partner for the European Union in its energy security.
Kazakhstan's ambassador Roman Vasilenko. And now the moment you have really been waiting for. It's the World Cup, of course. Now, superstar Lionel Messi beat competent but blunt Austria 2-0. The Argentinian attacker has broken Germany's Miroslav Klose's record as the all-time leading goalscorer at a World Cup. Messi scored a hat-trick against Algeria last week to match the 16-goal record. His strikes against Austria took him into the lead. Expect more to come when Messi plays against Jordan next. And another top star had a good night. Kylian Mbappé scored France's first 2 goals against harmless Iraqis who spent most of the match chasing the ball. Final result 3-0. Mbappé's goals came nearly 3 hours apart after thunderstorms in the Philadelphia area delayed the second half kickoff by a shade under 2 hours. That means France is qualified to move on to the last 32, as well as fellow Group I team Norway, who beat Senegal 3-2. The Nordics' Manchester City striker Erling Haaland scored twice and has now scored 4 goals in 2 matches, twice as many as any other Norwegian player in World Cup history. How about that? And finally, Algeria kept their World Cup dreams alive by beating Jordan 2-1. For the Jordanians, it was a frustrating evening. They've given a good account of themselves, but it's their first World Cup ever. And we know how tough it is to get points on the board. On the menu tonight, Portugal against Uzbekistan, England versus Ghana, Panama faces Senegal, and Colombia meets Congo. That's it for today. Thanks for joining us this morning. If you want to continue the conversation, send us your questions or comments via our email address. That's europetoday@euronews.com. In the meantime, stay with us for more of the latest news live here on Euronews. I'm Stefan Grobe. Take care and see you tomorrow.